We have a saying on this channel. Trauma cannot be spelled without mwah. Trauma. Good evening, laddies, lasses, and lassos, and welcome to the click. You smell absolutely astounding today, and don't let anyone else tell you otherwise. As you might have guessed from the intro, today we're gonna dig into sweet, sweet trauma. By which I mean r/TraumatizeThemBack, a really entertaining subreddit with some comeback zingers. Have you ever found yourself in the shower realizing that argument that you had with a Karen in the grocery store 3 years ago? You should have had a very specific comeback that you just now thought about. Well, on this subreddit, we have tons of stories where people actually came up with the comebacks in the right moment. Not like us other mortals that come up with it in the shower 3 years later. So enjoy. Mwah. I finally did it. Someone was talking on the phone with loudspeakers, sitting close to me while we were inside of the bus. So I joined the conversation with full confidence. When she gave me that, "Are you mad?" look, I said, "Oh, sorry, I thought it was a group call since you put it on loudspeaker for everyone to hear." She quietly told the person, "I'll call you back," and ended the call immediately. This reminds me of those really bitter moments back in middle school when you were whispering with your friend in the back and the teacher was like, "Is it something you want to share with the whole class?" But in this case it feels pretty justified, to be honest. I should start doing this. This is absolutely hilarious. I told you not to press hard. I have ulcerative colitis. I present atypically, and for that reason I am often used as a teaching aid for medical students when my consultant has them. This story goes back a decade. I hadn't been feeling particularly good for a couple of weeks, and had spoken to the consultant, and we thought it must just be a bug, as my bloods were within the acceptable range. I turned up at the session. The students, fourth-year medical students, learning about gastrointestinal conditions ahead of that rotation, they had a lecture and asked me questions, some thoughtful, some incredibly stupid. Then they got to learn how to palpate someone's stomach to feel for potential issues, given prior surgeries. They always asked about them. I'd been feeling more and more off until Rugby Fella had his turn about 2/3 the way through the queue. He had asked some pretty stupid questions during the session and seemed he wasn't particularly liked among the group. I would hear him talk about his date that evening after the afternoon session had finished. He stood there talking to the consultant and ignoring me. My body jumped as he touched me with his cold hands and started pressing hard. I gently brought it up with him, stating he didn't need to press that hard to get what he was looking for, and gave that look to the consultant. And he pressed harder. I warned them I felt like I could vomit. RF kept on pressing. I immediately sat up and my lunch literally covered him from the neck down. I saw him turn a shade of white only ever seen when it snows, get a glazed look in his eyes, and look as if he were about to vomit too. I mean, if you're gonna get into this field of business, you better get used to bodily liquids and vomitationous fluids. I apologized and just said I did warn you, wiping the dribbled bits out of my beard. He muttered, "I didn't think you were serious." I smiled. Weren't you listening when I said excessive pressure on my stomach makes me nauseous? Sometimes it comes out as wind, sometimes foul farts, other times nasty belches. Sometimes it's vomit, sometimes it's just bile, sometimes something more. The following students were gentle, and we got through the session as RF just stood there, wondering what to do. I heard him say quietly as they left, he can't go on his date like this. For 5 years, the story was told to incoming students for that rotation. Honestly, probably the best lesson they got that day. Actually listen to the patients, because otherwise, you may just be covered in vomit right before your fancy evening date. The instant karma. My employer requests that after sick leaves, that I describe my symptoms. So I do. Oh, is this going where I think it's going? It sounds a little bit odd, but maybe it's more like I had a cold, or I was in the hospital for an injury, or toothache or something like that. But I'm guessing it's gonna be a bit more detailed. So yeah, my 36M employer has this whole form that everyone has to fill every time they return from sick leave. It's for accounting, and mostly contains pretty dull stuff, such as the length of the leave and what category of sick leave it is, and on whose permit. But it also has this whole section that I have always found rather direct, which is basically making you describe your symptoms. I shit myself while I was heading for the office. I presume it is there because, as you know, bosses are always paranoid about people faking sick leave. So after a while, I started to make sure that they hate their own nosy forms, and started giving symptom descriptions in unnecessary and graphic detail. Here are some of my favorites over the years. My diarrhea was so loose that it bordered on drinkable water. The clumps of phlegm that I coughed up could stick light objects onto walls. This is a confirmed fact. Ooh, you have to attach the image as well to properly prove it. While I did not proceed to test this, by all accounts, my bowel movements behaved as non-Newtonian fluid. The pus-filled discharge smelled so bad that it could knock out small mammals. At first, my boss would just come to me in the hallway and nod mysteriously. I read your report. Now she seems used to it. It's not really for her anyway, and she usually just skims through them. She said this to people at accounting she feels sorry for. I have never met anyone from accounting. Then again, they still keep the same form after years and years, so maybe they just enjoy reading these? I mean, maybe if they're not too squeamish about this stuff. Maybe this is what they laugh about by the coffee machine. Oh yeah, did you read the report about the explosive diarrhea and the person who shit themselves in the cab? Oh, goody. Man, that would at least beat the conversations that were around the coffee machine back when I worked in an office. God damn. Reminds me of like the conversations around the dinner table when I hang out with my family. It always comes back to Simba's diarrhea for some reason. I don't know why, but that's always where it goes to. Everyone is very used to it by now, but if you ever bring like a +1 or something, it's a bit of a shock. Edit, no, this is in no way a legal thing to do here. This is in Finland. By the way the law works here, no one minds. I could probably just not put anything there and no one would mind. No one could realistically get in trouble for what they answer in there. I just want to make a point. I mean, it is pretty funny, to be honest. I hope other people laugh about it too at the office. It sounds like something that's gonna make for really funny conversations at the coffee machine. You know, it beats talking about the fucking weather or whatever. As far as small talk go, this sounds way more exciting. My English teacher was gonna tell my dad he wasn't my hero. So a little background first. My dad cheated on my mom when she was pregnant with me. Then on my first Christmas, they had a big fight over her travel plans while she was on leave from the Navy. After that, he never contacted us again until my 21st birthday. This has always been a sore subject for me. Yeah, I can imagine. That sounds like an absolute deadbeat. I've always said that, you know, people in school, specifically, should be a bit careful about, like, drilling into family stuff, or, like, taking it for granted, rather, because complicated family situations are way more common than you might think. Now on to the story. My junior year of high school, I had an English teacher who everyone hated. I especially butted heads with her. We were going over the hero's journey, and she decided to ask me who my hero was. Not wanting to really interact with her beyond a short response, I said I didn't really have one. Her response was, "Well, I'm gonna tell your dad you said that?" I immediately responded, "If you find him, let me know so I can punch him in the face." She tried to act like she didn't hear me, but I knew she did because everyone else reacted to it. She tried to avoid interacting with me after that. What like a strange out-of-pocket thing to say as well. Also kind of stereotypical. Why can't like the mom who dealt with everything herself after the deadbeat left be the hero? Why couldn't that have been the case either? I don't know. Weird like out-of-pocket thing to say to like a student when you don't actually know what their family situation is like. You know that shitty parents exist, right? And assuming everyone's parents must be their heroes is also kind of like, man. A neighbor wouldn't shut up about how many rooms our house has. Ooh, is that a bit of jealousy I smell? A few years back, my husband and I moved to a new house. It was in the right part of town, good price, good school district, good yard, good bones. The only real issue with it, besides needing new paint, was that it was bigger than what we were looking for. But at that point in our search, we had already put offers in on 6 or 7 other houses, so we were past being picky. We were looking at starting a family pretty immediately, so it's not like having 5 bedrooms when we only wanted 3 was going to kill us. Or if you get a puppy, it can have its own bedroom, and then a guest room for people to sleep over, you know, if there's a New Year party that gets late or something. Or just a home office. You can always use more rooms. Or a home gym. Hell yeah. Or a room for painting Warhammer figurines. You know, are you sure that 5 bedrooms are enough? Now I feel like maybe you should have 8 or something. Zoe moved into our too big house, got preggo a few months later, lost a baby a couple months after that. It was pretty devastating, physically and emotionally, so we chose to wait a bit before trying again. That summer we went to a meet your neighbors kind of event hosted just down the road. We brought cookies, put some faces to names, and were just generally socializing when a couple came up to me and my husband and asked,
"Oh, are you the ones who moved into this address?"
I responded that we were. They then said something along the lines of,
"Well, that house is too big for you. Where are all your kids? We need more kids around here. We probably would have bought that house. It was on the market. When we were looking. We could really use the extra space. We have 3 boys in there, but no walls."
I chose to say something like, "Oh, we just haven't gotten to that point yet," and politely changed the subject to their kids. No big deal. Later, as my husband and I were grabbing our empty cookie tray and leaving, the couple shouted across the gathering to us again to remind us that our house was really too big for only 2 people. I mean, maybe they mean well, but it's a little bit odd to persist with something like that. You know, if someone buys a house that is a bit bigger than what you need for 2 people, they are probably planning to fill it at some point. Why are you egging on people you have just met about oh, isn't it time to poop out the babies? I don't know, man. You can mention it once, maybe, and then let it go if they don't engage, okay? It's fine. I can't remember exactly what the wife said, but it ran along the lines of,
"It's actually selfish to..."
Oh. Here comes the audacity.
"To keep all that square footage empty without any kids. A family with kids could have moved in there."
Somehow she was personally injured by me not moving in with children. So I walked a bit closer to not be shouting. But still plenty of people got to overhear me go, "Well, we were going to wait a bit after my miscarriage," since I still can't quite forget how it felt nearly bleeding out in my bathtub. "But since you say so, I guess my husband and I need to run home to get busy." She froze. Her husband started mumbling about, "Well, that wasn't necessary." "Then why did you keep pressing?" There are certain, very obvious social landmines that you don't, push for. You know, you don't ask someone how their pregnancy is going if you're not absolutely sure that they're pregnant. My friend's dad did this at, a dinner party right at the beginning. He was like, "Oh, how's the pregnancy coming along?" And the other person is like, "I'm not pregnant." And that was, right at the beginning. They sat together for, 3 hours. You know, there are certain social landmines that you just avoid. And this is one of them. This is one of them. And a lot of people seem to be really interested in whatever they happen to be eating or drinking at that moment. I was pretty embarrassed, cried on the walk home, but that neighbor has never once spoken to me again, so I think it was worth it, and we did end up having a baby. Woo! Happy ending, you avoid annoying neighbors, and you get the family to fill out the house like you wanted. That is absolutely amazing, hell yeah. And still a couple of bedrooms left over for a guest bedroom and a home office and a miniature painting room and a home gym and so on and so forth. Life's good, man. I am a betrayer of the white race. To give context, my father was born in Morocco, meaning I have an Arabic-sounding last name. Despite that, I look like your average white dude, with possibly a hint of Mediterranean details if you look closely. This was in 2020-2021, when the first wave of COVID vaccines rolled around. Me being obese, I was in the priority list for the first dose. I was waiting in the lobby with my mask, my ID and social security card. Some of the staff working at this moment were not white, but I couldn't tell where exactly their origin, nor did I care. But this other person right next to me, he did care. Drunk out of his mind, starts blathering about, "We're not in our country anymore. All the sons of Arabs, African plebes, just can't trust anyone these days." He then put his arm around my shoulder, shook me like I was an old pal, and said, "We're just you and me against the world. We need to stay strong and together, or else we'll get replaced too." Yes indeed. How do you make sure that your race is the superior one? That's right, show up f***ing wasted to vaccine centrals. Why did I not think of that? With his drunk-induced shaking, I accidentally dropped my ID card. Drunkard says, "I got you, buddy." Picks it up and starts reading my very Arabic name. He's flabbergasted, shocked like no other, wide eyes and everything you can imagine. A nurse calls my name. I take back my ID, and right when I enter the vaccination room, he screams, You betrayed me!" Like I was Brutus and he was Caesar. He was stabbed in his poor little white heart. Oh my god, the pain. Still a hilarious moment in this dark period, where I felt like a spy. I have heard similar stories before. For example, if there is a Karen in a grocery store that comes up to someone and be like, "Oh, those darn immigrants!" And the person they're talking to is like an immigrant as well, but maybe like a bit of white passing or whatever. And they start going these like racist rants, like it's their internal little book club, but for racism. And they don't realize the person they try to include in the racist book club is the person the book club would poop on. I don't know why people do this. I mean, it's because they're racist, but it's still, like, fascinating. I used full frontal nudity to stop my mother's verbal abuse. For good. My mother has always had a bad temper. Since I was young, she would yell the most vitriolic insults, mock me, scream obscenities, etc. I learned that temper from her and would give back the same as she doled out. Then I grew up, left the house, and unlearned the hot temper. That is very good to hear. Those kind of hot tempers are just hell to deal with for everyone, right? It's hell for everyone around the person with the hot temper, and it usually means that the person with the temper is gonna get lonelier over time because people just check out, especially as you get older and people have options who they choose to spend their time with. Having this kind of temper will definitely put you towards the bottom of that list. So, when I had to move back briefly during my late 20s, I had done a lot of self-work and had a pretty good sense of inner peace. She did not. She would lose her temper frequently, and I tried a whole arsenal of tools I knew to disengage. I told her she's being mean and hurting me, but to no avail. I tried suggesting we talk things through in the morning when her head is cool. Nope. Tried not engaging and just walking away, but she would follow me to my door and slam and scream outside of it. Great. At a certain point, I just started messing with her and pointing out the flaws in her arguments since I figured I may as well have fun if she's going to be a menace. But that got old fast and did nothing to stop the onslaught. Then, one night, I came out for some water and she got offended because she came in right after looking for a snack and I was in her way? Or something truly benign in the same line. She started yelling. I just said, I'm going back to my room to sleep and good night and walked away. I got to my room, closed and locked the door, stripped down for sleep, I sleep naked, and got into bed. Then she started slamming and screaming. My nervous system was entirely calm, but I was incredibly annoyed since I had to work in the morning and she just wasn't letting up. So I told her, Mom, I am in bed, naked, ready to sleep. If you keep screaming, I will come out there as I am and you will not like it. She kept screaming. I sighed, flipped off the covers, and opened my door entirely naked and calm. My mother turned a lovely shade of purple I have never seen before, and immediately stopped screaming. Then she turned on her heel and walked to her bedroom. She never yelled at me again. I don't know why that worked, but honestly, I love telling the story, because something about being calm and naked short-circuited my mother's ability to engage in verbally abusing me. Lol. I wonder if the fact that a grown, naked woman was confronting her, rather than her child, made her realize you're an actual human adult being. I honestly have no clue what exactly got to her about it, but I am open to all theories, since honestly I still wonder sometimes how exactly this got her to stop. How long has it been? I lived with her for at least 9 months after the full frontal nudity. It's been about 2 years now and she has not done it since. I mean, then it sounds like a mildly traumatizing wake-up call. This is no longer, your 12-year-old child that you can boss around or whatever. Not that that would make this sort of behavior okay, but then comes the realization that this is actually another adult. This is another peer that I'm yelling at, and that sort of short-circuits this ability to, treat them like a tiny child that you can boss around. So it's probably something like that, along with the shock of, being confronted by someone calmly, completely nude. Of course, it's a little bit of a flabbergaster. Why my puppy flunked out of obedience school. Oh no, not the little puppy flunking school. Several years ago, I got a puppy and signed him up for puppy kindergarten obedience classes. The teacher turned out to be an extremely dominating woman with a loud nasal voice and the personality of a Marine drill sergeant. Oh, sounds pleasant. Sounds a little bit overkill for I don't know, puppy classes, doesn't it? She devoted the first lesson to harshly criticizing everything we did, and at the end of the class, we all slunk out feeling like complete idiots who couldn't even be trusted with the care of a goldfish. But isn't that the point of showing up to class? That feels like a teacher grilling you for not already knowing everything. I mean, if you did, you wouldn't need to show up for school. And I guess the same thing is true here. If the puppy was already super obedient and the people already knew exactly how to raise this particular breed of dog, then you wouldn't be there. You're there because you need the assistance and the guidance. Why would they give you shit for that? It defeats the purpose of the whole business. For the second class, we were told to bring treats for training and be sure our puppies were hungry. I brought treats my puppy loved at home, but he was so excited to be around the other pups that he wouldn't eat any of them. As a result, he wasn't very motivated to learn the commands we were supposed to be training our puppies to obey. The teacher noticed and rudely berated me at some length for bringing the wrong treats. She then took some treats out of her fanny pack and proclaimed that
All dogs love these.
She held one out and smirked triumphantly when my pup took it in his mouth, only to be gobsmacked a few seconds later when he spat it out on her foot. She was shocked, speechless, and her mouth kept opening and closing like a fish as she struggled to find something to say. I completely lost it and laughed until my sides hurt. Several of my classmates joined in. That's how my puppy flunked out of obedience school. I subsequently took him to a different class with a nice, very professional teacher, and now my dog is very well-behaved adult. Funniest thing my dog ever did. The whole thing is so weird. You wouldn't need to go to puppy obedience class if it was already an adult obedient puppy. You are there because it is a disobedient little chaotic puppy. My god, man. Reconnected with a man who remembered our time together differently. When I was 14, I briefly dated a 19-year-old man who was the Sunday school teacher at the local LDS church. I didn't want to date him, but he stalked me for months, leaving roses and notes in my locker at junior high. When you were 14, so wait, he snuck into like the locker section of the school he didn't even go to sneak in love letters and stuff? Wow, how romantic. After feeling pushed into it, I dated him for a short time and then managed to tell him I just wanted to be friends. When I got older, I was able to look back at much of what happened then with clear eyes and could see how horrible it all was. I went home for a family wedding and ran into this gentleman again. We decided to catch up. As we were talking, he asked why I slept with him and then friend-zoned him while continuing to date other people. Or like dating other 14-year-olds instead of... Yeah, that would make sense, wouldn't it? He talked about how it had been so hurtful for him. I asked him if he wanted the true answer to that question, and he said he did. I told him that I was a 14-year-old child with zero experience with intimacy, that I had said no when he first started pushing, that he had spent 45 minutes getting more and more aggressive until I finally gave in. I told him that I gave in because I didn't want to end up back in the hospital like I did when I had a previous traumatic experience a few months earlier, that he also knew about. Up until that, I had never even kissed a boy. I told him that he forcefully did this to me. He cried, tried to say it wasn't how it was. I just told him not to ask questions he doesn't want the truth to. But honestly, I'm glad he felt a tiny bit of the pain that I had experienced. So the dude knew that you were SA'd before and pressured you aggressively anyway? And he was 19 at the time? Yeah, he knew what he was doing, targeting a 14-year-old with trauma history. He didn't even try to apologize, try to tell you that it was hurtful to him? What, is he a psycho? Completely psychopathic behavior. Crocodile tears too. Ew, what a disgusting person. I hope he gets a life he deserves. Yeah, he knew better at 19. He probably wanted OP to downplay the truth. I am happy OP kept it straightforward. Yeah, it sounds like maybe reality caught up with him and at least he felt bad about it, but Jesus Christ, that is so dark, man. What a shitty person. He thought he got away with abusing students for decades. I made sure he didn't. This might be one of the heavier stories on the sub, but it's also the most satisfying revenge I could imagine. When I was a student, I was intimately abused by a teacher. For decades, schools quietly transferred him around. He has been at 7 different schools, 3 states, for 37 years, instead of stopping him. Teachers knew, some warned students, but nobody actually took action. He got to retire like nothing happened. Also, law enforcement refused to charge him. I finally posted about him on social media. I wasn't sure what to expect, maybe a few people would remember him. Instead, over 30 women messaged me, each one saying they were also either abused or harassed by him. That post started something. His name is being shared, people are finally talking. The silence that protected him for so long is gone. He spent decades thinking he had buried his past, but now every time someone Googles his name, the truth follows him. I mean, that's the least piece of karma you can expect in these kind of situations, to be honest. And one thing that I have seen in life with horrible people that do this kind of stuff is that they love your silence because it makes you feel alone in it. Even like in this instance where there's like 30 plus people that all had the same experience with this person, and now it becomes a really powerful thing because everyone is speaking out. All of a sudden, he's the one who's like alone and targeted, if you will, with very much needed karma, but still. But with the silence, everyone else feels alone. It feels like you're the only one being victimized by this person. You feel isolated. Silence is one of their like main weapons, and you did something very good. So glad you did that. We had something like this happen with a local piercer who owned a tattoo studio. He wasn't assaulting by legal definition, so much as coercing barely 18-year-old girls into consenting to acts they didn't initially say yes to, then making them feel like they can't say anything because they agreed. He would call clients that he had pierced as minors with their parents' consent once they turned 18 to convince them to hang out. A 40-year-old crusty-ass man. He looked way older, and I'm 40 myself, so I can say that. Nothing he could be jailed for, but when someone finally said something online, suddenly so many young women were telling their stories. He had to flee the state the next day and returned after things calmed down. All his staff quit and he had to slowly find new ones. You almost never hear him recommended anymore when he used to be considered the best. He even fixed a piercing for me once for free that I didn't even have done there before all this came out. They can be so good at bamboozling the community. And also one important thing to remember with people like this is that someone can be absolutely horrible to some people or just someone in some cases, and be absolutely normal and pleasant to other people. Take this person for example. He was really creepy and inappropriate and coercy with young girls. That doesn't mean he's gonna act the same way with, his dude bros. It doesn't mean he would act the same way with his family members or like his colleagues at work or whatever. It's a very specific group of people or a very specific demographic that he acts this way towards, and anyone outside of that demographic would probably just see him as a normal working dude. And that's something that is important to keep in mind with stories like this. People aren't Disney villains. They can be absolutely horrendous and have justifiable karma like this because of it, but that doesn't mean that you're gonna notice them as anything different when they're just doing regular stuff in life. The worst abusive person that you can imagine still goes to the store to buy milk. They probably have friends they hang out with. They might even have a nice job. So I think that's important to keep in mind. People sometimes hype up this image of a Disney villain when they hear stuff like this, but in reality, 90% of the time, they blend in with everyone else, and that's what makes it so difficult for victims to come forward. I found out my childhood bully did adult films, and it's so hard to just be quiet about. In middle school, I had a girl who was passionately obsessed with torturing me, humiliated me in class every chance she got. She would send girls to date me, then laugh about it saying it was all a joke. She would mock my height, hair, ethnicity, everything. I have no doubts this contributed to my mild social anxiety. She did so much worse, but I don't want to get into it. I have a side business where we work on erasing or at least minimizing a person's digital footprint. And while working with a client who is attempting to rebrand, I found a VR adult site she was a part of. This website is niche, pretty much dead. All the videos have like 500 views. And then I see her, my childhood bully. I honestly couldn't believe it. It looked so weird and a little sad, to be honest. My eyes widened in complete disbelief. It just looked so weird, man. I can't explain the feeling. Nobody knows about this except me. Not even her family or close friends. Are you sure? How would you know that? I mean, maybe it's not something you tell your family, but how would you know? And it's taking every fiber of my being to not DM her family and friends and ruin her life for what she did to me. I haven't done anything and most likely won't because I imagine it would destroy her, but I can't say it's not on my mind almost daily. Edit, to the people DM me telling me to, jork it to my bully. What is wrong with you? Lol. How do you know her family and friends don't know? Yeah, exactly, that's what I thought. My first thought would be that this could backfire spectacularly if the bully isn't ashamed of it. I can just imagine her replying with, "Birch, you think I don't know?" And then telling everyone she knows what a weirdo from middle school is obsessed with her to the point where they found her on an old obscure adult site. Honestly, with stuff like this, I think it's better just move on. Even if she was a horrendous bully, stuff like this can very much just send you down a very bitter rabbit hole. And also, if she's an incredibly confrontational person, she will probably want to take revenge if she figures out it's you. And it's like, is that really the path you want to send your life down? Even if you could argue that it's like, oh, this person was the shitty one to begin with, and it's karma and stuff. Is it worth it for your own life and your own sense of self? Probably not. I would just move on and keep it as a little fun headcanon in the back of my head, man, that's so weird that my bully ended up doing this and coming to me as a client. Man, that's so weird, haha, lemao. And then move on with your life. I think that is healthier. Not saying what they did when they were a bully is justified in any way, but I don't think it's worth sending your own life down a path of vengeance and potentially getting stuck in these messy confrontations and maybe even lawsuits, So, nah, I don't think it's worth it. Not really. The teacher asks me if I am R-worded. When I, 24F, was in 8th grade, 13 years old, I asked my terrible math teacher a simple question about the lesson, and he asked me, "Are you R-worded?" in front of the entire class. I could not believe he actually thought it was appropriate to say that to a student. Little did he know I actually have to be tested for special ed in elementary school for a processing delay, which was actually just undiagnosed ADHD. I am medicated now and doing great, but it struck a nerve for me, but mainly for the students who have special needs. I grew up feeling like I was stupid because of my delays, and it enraged me. I am not proud of how I responded, but I looked him dead in the eyes and said,
"Yeah, I lick windows and eat crayons."
I mean, you're also a 13-year-old snapping back at a shitty teacher, so like, meh. My teacher got all flustered and tried to play it off as a joke and then asked, "Yeah, you lick windows?" And then I said something like,
"Yep, because you clearly think I'm R-worded."
I said it so seriously and did not crack. I remember the class trying to stifle the laughter, and I just glared at my teacher for the remainder of the class. I am not proud of using that word or using the phrase, and I know how messed up it is even before I said it. Meh, you were a 13-year-old clapping back at a shitty teacher. I don't think that should, like, gnaw at your conscience. Is that a hickey? I was not, by any stretch of the imagination, popular in high school. Yeah, who of us was, right? God damn. But I did swim on our varsity team. Bullied is a strong word to use, but let's just say I was mean-girled a lot. Popular people on our team would say horrible things to me, tried to embarrass me, would make it clear none of them liked me, used ugly photos of me in school collages, etc. One day, I was walking on the deck to get to the pool for practice. I was one of the last in the pool, but one of the boys in the mean girl group watched me walk in from the deck, and for the first time he noticed a scar above my right breast that he thought was a hickey. Boy, loudly,
"Hey, OP, what did you get up to last night? Is there a hickey on your chest?"
People started to chuckle, and he smiles really big, very proud of himself. Me, completely deadpan. "Actually, that's the scar for my meaty port when I had cancer." His face completely fell. He was mortified. You could have heard a pin drop in that pool. Everyone's mouths were open, except for my two friends that were beaming from ear to ear. I just walked past him and jumped in my lane. No one talked again until the coach came out to start practice. It's been decades since I was in high school, but thinking about this moment brings me joy. And yes, I actually had a childhood cancer, and that was a scar from that treatment. Fun fact, me and that boy actually became friends after that. Hell yeah, everyone is growing up, that's so beautiful. He helped me get my first summer job. He picked me up and took me to a movie with his friends, the first and only time I got stood up for a date. And as far as I can tell, he's a really great dad and husband now. We've lost touch over the years, but I always think about him when I need to remember people can change. Oh, that's such a beautiful ending to the story, that people actually grow up, and even people that acted a bit poopy when you were kids can actually grow up to be like good, decent people when they're out of that environment. Because high school can really bring out the worst in like everyone, and everyone is young and immature and incredibly hormonal, and doesn't justify anything, mind you, but people can certainly grow out of it, and that brings me hope of humanity. Attempt at homophobia backfired spectacularly. This happened a long while ago while I was at work, and didn't get the full story until, I don't know, later that night or the next day. It's been long enough that I don't remember. My partner reminded me of this story recently, and I have been lurking around here, so figured someone might get a good laugh out of it. I worked at a fairly popular student bar. My partner was a regular there. We're both dudes. I was fairly early in my transition at the time, like maybe a few months on T. And while I was usually read as a guy, I was consistently perceived as very feminine. On that particular evening, my partner looked like a generic dude bro. So my partner was waiting at the bar. Not quite at the bar yet, but fairly close. Unprompted, for whatever reason, this punter next to him turns to him, gestured towards me, and says something along the lines of, "Well, he's definitely a p***er?" I have never heard the word before. Oh my god. A partner comes straight back with, "Yeah, that's my boyfriend." The guy starts making incredulous noises, all like, "Nah, there's no way, you're having me on." So partner decides to prove a point, which is where I get dragged into it. My partner calls out, "Hey," points to the guy, "this guy just called you a p***er." I just look at him, nonplussed, and say, "Okay, and then carry on, because holy frick, it's busy and I don't have time for this poop." Apparently the guy looked absolutely mortified and apologized a few times. Hopefully he learned a lesson about not assuming random people will be on board with your homophobic BS. Also apologies if this is the wrong flair. I don't know what I'm doing. This story's pretty mild in the grand scheme of things, and I'm not quite sure what flair fits. It's just kind of funny. It's just instant karma social embarrassment. I befriended my ex-boyfriend's ex-girlfriend after he ghosted. I dated the guy, let's call him Kevin, for about 6 months. I love yous were said, commitment was had, and he was only green flags. Up until he left for a trip to Europe and entirely ghosted me out of nowhere. I was absolutely crushed. I mean, what the frick? It took me a while to recover, but I eventually got over it. Well, mostly. But I had always had this thought in the back of my head about the most petty revenge. Then one morning, 2 years after said ghosting, I decided to get back at Kevin. I knew who Kevin's ex was because he had mentioned her a few times. So I slid into her Instagram DMs and basically said, "We need to talk about Kevin." And she responded, which was wild in of itself, but even more wild. He had ghosted her too, and after 2 years, no less. We ended up bonding pretty well and had many a laugh at Kevin's expense. I mean, maybe he had a type, in a way. Like, maybe becoming friends with, like, your ex's exes is, like, a thing, you know? It was quite cathartic, really. Realized that at least he had great taste in women. And since we were both his type, we were also really similar. Yeah, exactly! That's what I mean. Maybe that's a good way of, like, finding friends. Maybe Kevin isn't, like, a good example. He sounds like a pile of poo. But, like, the principle of it. So she eventually flew out to visit me, and we had an epic road trip. Took lots of photos, and just had a holy girly moment, you know. He blocked me, but still followed her. So she posted the photos of us having a blast together, as she would have done anyway. But the fact that he would see it and shit a brick? Oh, so sweet. Never got to see his reaction, but imagination is a great thing. His ex and I joked about making a Finsta pretending to slowly fall in love, but that was too much effort, even if it would have been funny. So ladies, here is some ammo for you, and gentlemen, don't underestimate the power of women supporting women. Exes supporting exes. Yeah. I got traumatized back. This is the story of how I, rightfully so, got traumatized back. I was about 14 or 15. This happened at one of my dad's legendary birthday parties. They took days. His friends even called it my dad's name festival. I basically worked there as a waitress, dishwasher, serving food, everything that needed to be done. When the people were successfully drunk and not needing so much help, I would have fun and talk to my dad's friends. One of them was this lady, approximately in her 30s. She had a giant scar on the back of her forearm, from her wrist all the way up to her elbow. I asked her what happened to her. She chuckled with this bitter expression and answered that she always tell people that she used to work in a circus and a tiger did that. I was being an asshole and kept pushing, asking, "Now really, what happened?" And then she dropped a bomb. One of my stepfathers grabbed me and threw me through a glass door. I stammered and apologized. Lesson learned. Yeah, if they want to joke something aside, it's probably good to just take it and move on. Speaking of like those social landmines, but you were also like 14, and lesson learned, I suppose. Gaslighting the solar folk. Someone on another subreddit asked about solicitors harassing them, and my wife reminded me about this. A few years back, right near the beginning of the pandemic, we had a problem with people trying to sell solar panels coming door to door, and it was getting ridiculous. We were in an apartment building and couldn't install anything like that under any circumstances, so why are you bothering us daily? Anyway, one day this lady knocks on the door and my wife answers. And in a panic, after realizing it was yet another solar salesperson that just blurts out in a feigned bimbo, "Oh, you need to talk to my husband. Yeah, sure, come back tomorrow, he'll be here." I semi-overhear this, and when she comes back inside, I am like, wow, way to throw me under the bus. Wife, God, I'm so sorry, I just panicked. I didn't want to be mean to her. We immediately forget about it and go back to making dinner and watching cartoons or whatever. The next day, Saturday I might add, we're having a relaxed day at home with the dogs, and there is a knock at the door. My wife looks in the camera and goes, "Ah, shite, it's that solar lady from yesterday, I'm so sorry." It's cool. I got this. So I'm basically my boxers, unshaven, I ruffle my shirt up a bit and mess my hair up, slip my wedding ring off and walk into the hall. Hello? Hi, your wife said... What? My wife died 3 years ago. Oh my god, I'm sorry. Your girlfriend sent... What? Nope, I'm not dating. Your sister? Nope. Try again. I don't... A young lady came out and told me to talk to her husband about these solar panels yesterday? Oh, you want the girls that live upstairs, I think. No, she definitely came out of this door. What the hell? Did the upstairs girls break into my apartment again? Can you describe her? Yes, she had green hair. Oh, what? The girls upstairs are two brunettes. I don't think I know anyone with green hair. Like turquoise? There is a girl down the block. No, it was like green. Huh, this is weird. When was this? Yesterday, around like 5. She came out of that door. I talked to her right there. I have no idea what you're talking about. I work from home. I'm single. I mean, look at me. I don't leave my house much. I don't know. There was a girl, I think, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was absolutely convinced and confused. "This is super weird, ma'am. I'm gonna call the landlord and pull the cameras. I think someone might be messing with you. Or broke into my place. I might have been walking the dogs." Solar lady looks horrified. "Anyway, I'm gonna go put on some pants and deal with that. Bye." You have a good, I swear there was a girl. I shut the door, and my wife and I had a really good chuckle about it. The end. "You should have told her that sounds exactly like your wife, who died 3 years ago. The lady met a ghost." I mean, okay, maybe less believable if you pull it to that extent, but it's still a really funny story because it completely sidetracks the whole sales thing. That is so funny. I remember one time, it wasn't really a Traumatize-Them-Back moment, it was way more lame. I had someone who insisted on spam calling my phone, and eventually I picked up, and they were of course selling something I wasn't interested in but wouldn't let up. So I just told them like, "Hey, call back tomorrow. I have more time then." And then I just blocked them. That's what I did. Oh yes indeed, like a true millennial. Creeping out a creeper. Back in the dawn of popularizing internet, when FTP was king and there were no search engines, I got to read lots of banned books by clicking random links. I was also a preteen Chinese girl with mild autism, so I look innocent as heck. One time, my dad brought me out to dinner with some of his acquaintances, and we had to wait outside for a free table. Me, being a bit overwhelmed by new people, went to a close-by bush to look at bugs. One of the older men, maybe about 40 or 50, came around trying to strike a conversation, complimenting me on my book reading. I was grossed out by his leering face, but kept a polite reply so that my dad wouldn't lose face. Until he creepily smiled and said, "Have you read any yellow-colored books?" Adult books. Oh. That's very inappropriate considering this is like a 12-year-old kid. I was taken aback, but also thoroughly angered. I read enough to know people like that will start physical contact if I behave like a typical Asian girl. One thing my autism gave me is the inability to feel shame. So I looked around to see all the other grown-ups are out of earshot. And then I proceed to employ my deepest voice that sounded like a 30-year-old smoker. "Oh yeah, I've been with a goldfish salesman. P-word, that show me how to play with the flute. BJ, and tickle holes. Oh my god. Do you want to try my hand?" I walked closer to him with the biggest toothy grin I could muster. The guy looked like he went through the 5 stages of horror and backed away. I thought that was it, but he couldn't let it go and brought it up at the dinner table. He chastised my parents for allowing me to be so vulgar and raised a dirty little H word. Everyone was shocked and asked me what happened. I put on my most childish, high-pitched voice to say excitedly, "I just told Uncle I play the flute." I play in the school band. "And we have a goldfish." Which we do. Now all the other adults breathe a sigh of relief and scolded the creepy guy for having a dirty mind. And he couldn't convince them I said anything bad without sounding like a P-word. Best social interaction I had as a child. I hope all the other adults also kind of caught on that he was being a creep about it, so they kept other kids around them safe, because that does not sound like a reliable person at all. Dear God. Well, laddies, lasses, and louses, I do hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed having you here. Remember to check out the hoodies, link in the description, available for limited time only, and I will see you again in the very near future. Take care.